Hello, everyone. This is our EDD project, Hall Runners and Skippers, and my name is Bryce Gibson, and this is my teammate.
I'm Xochillt.
This is our project.
This is us, a little team picture that you see.
The first problem that we see at Hillcrest specifically is that we have these ID badges with barcodes on them conveniently, but we never use them. And we're wondering, how can we use ID badges to take attendance, which will make it easier for teachers to take attendance. Based on a study by the Department of Education, we found that 1 in every 6 students missed at least 15 days of school in 2015. And this is known as chronic absenteeism. And this issue is one that hinders learning all around the country, and it's one that is created by the teachers not holding students accountable for being tardy and for being absent.
Okay, so this is our problem statement, which is missing class time due to tardiness is a big issue that hinders the learning of students around the country. So our first justification that we found, which is this article, is why is school attendance important? And the reason why it's important is because it has a major impact in a student's life.
This is another study by a professor at University of North Texas, and she basically made a correlation between passing the TAKS test and the number of tardies that the student had. So for students that had 0 tardies, it said that 85% of them passed this test, and if you had 6 or more, then only 70% passed the test. And this is a graph showing exactly this. It may look like once you get past 10, it's almost every student fails the test, but this is because there's less students who have 10 absences, and there's a lot more that only have 0 or 1. So the stats are a little skewed.
And we found another article from the Department of Education of the United States of America. And what the article said is basically that being tardy or absent can cause you from falling behind due to absences. And this is also a crisis nationwide. It's not only in this school, but other schools and other universities. And our last justification is also by the Department of Education, and missing, what it says is that by being tardy, you miss important information in the morning, and you miss important essay due dates and maybe possible class trips. And then another justification that we found was that how we develop positive lifelong habits by being on time every day to school, and how being tardy to school can have a lifelong impact on your life, because if you start a job, you don't want to be late the first day, and that can make an impact in either your bosses.
So our solution that we found was that we wanted to use these ID badges that we wear, or that the students are supposed to wear, and using these will give us more precise attendance information, and it'll hold students accountable for their targets. So the first question we asked the teachers through a survey was what percentage of your students wore ID badges? Because we wanted to make sure whether the students actually wore them, so this would actually work. Through this survey, we found that teachers estimated that over 50% of teachers estimate that 10% or less of their students wear their ID badges. This is just for Hillcrest, and we think that if you need the ID badge to go to class, we think the teacher or the students will wear their ID badges more, and this statistic will improve from our product as well. We then asked teachers, would they use an ID badge scanner? And over 90% of teachers said yes, they would, as long as it doesn't slow down their beginning of their class or it isn't difficult to use. And this is often the issue that many teachers face is they're calling out attendance and it takes 10 or 15 minutes to actually take attendance and hinders students learning that way.
So what is the purpose of the ID badge scanner? When ID badges are required, staff can identify students with a single glance. Teachers can also take attendance easier. And during emergency situations, the teacher can know time in and out of each student. And the ID badge scanner will enforce ID badge requirements. It's difficult unless the student needs the ID badge in order to go to class, and this ID scanner will make sure that the ID is necessary in order to go in class.
The first big issue that we wanted to solve was tardiness, and again, just holding students accountable will make sure that they get to class on time and they move faster in the hallways.
And our second biggest issue is skipping class. Many kids skip class as their friends who are in class will call attendance for them. So if you have a friend in class, they can easily say your name that you're here present.
And our third big issue is now that we have an ID badge scanner that requires IDs, it'll aid in case of an emergency. And if the student has their IDs, then we can identify whether they're an intruder. These are the 5 things that we wanted to actually have for an attendance taking method. And the first one was that it takes attendance. The second one is that it records the time in and out of class. This is what we think will make it easier or make it more precise for their attendance. We need it to be easy to use. We need it to require their ID badges, and it needs to be impossible to manipulate by the students.
So this is our similar solutions matrix, and this basically tells us other methods instead of the ID badge scanner. And the first method would be the old method, which is calling out names. And based on our design criteria, what we wanted it to do, calling out names does take attendance, but it doesn't record the time in and out, and it's not easy to use because anyone could call your name out, and then it doesn't use an ID badge, and then it is possible to manipulate. And then the second way that you could take attendance would be an attendance sheet, and the attendance sheet does take attendance and it does record time in and out, and it is easy to use, but it doesn't require ID badges, and it's not impossible to, and it is possible to manipulate. And then another way that we were told that we could be marked present was a thumbprint, which it does take attendance and it does record the time in and out, but it's not easy to use because your thumbprint can easily fail any day. And then it doesn't use an ID badge, but it's not impossible to manipulate because it's your fingerprint. And then the last way would be a Google form, which is basically what was used during COVID. And then it will take attendance, but it doesn't record the time in and out, and it is easy to use, but it doesn't use your ID badge scanner. And it is possible to manipulate because any of your friends could do it for you.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the issue and about an ID badge scanner, but now we actually can show you what we created. And our solution was to use an ID badge scanner that scans the barcodes on our ID badges and then transfers to a Google sheet where the teacher can have the exact times that they go in and out of class and the student's name and take attendance that way.
So this is the scanner that we use.
The first thing we need to do to connect the scanner to the Google Sheet was to use Excel VBA. And before I started this, I wanted to create pseudocode to define what we wanted the code to do. So firstly, we wanted to make the cell, a certain cell, the barcode cell, so you can start in the same cell every time. And then it will go to it will move over to the row to the left and place the barcode into the first row. And then it will move one cell over and place the timestamp. And then this part, the bottom section of our pseudocode basically does the second timestamp for the barcode. And it'll make more sense once we see the actual Google Sheet. This was me in the making of transferring the pseudocode into actual code.
And then this is our, well, what we call it, our early design, which was our process that we had to do, which was first we have to create the code, then we have to do the testing to see if the code actually works. And then lastly is the editing process, which is finalizing.
So when we first created it, this is what it looked like. And you would put the barcode into the red box and it would place it into the first row on the left and then move over one and put a timestamp. And then it would move over again and put a timestamp. The issue with this is that in order for it to work, you would have to like open up the code and hit run code. And to avoid this, we decided to add an enter button. With this, now you just scan the barcode and then click the enter button that's on screen and it will work properly.
And then we didn't want to use our identities, so we decided to create some ID numbers and some names to use instead.
And in order to connect this list of names to their corresponding IDs, we needed to use some Excel code, which will basically just look in the box on the first row and look through the list of IDs and find the name that corresponds to them, or the ID. And the first issue, once we added this list of names, is that where the attendance actually takes, it says false. And this is not what we wanted. And we wanted it to say, whenever there is no ID there, we wanted to say student not found. And so we had to add an extra line to make it so it says student not found. So we added this line and now it says student not found.
And then we started the testing progress, and you can see us scanning one of the IDs. And when we scan the ID number would go in one of the rows. And when you press enter, it would record the time the student entered the classroom. And then this is the testing that we did. So we had our lovely Miss Akura. She was scanning books because we didn't want to use kids' IDs again. So as she was scanning the books, we found that it was a little hard to keep pressing enter in order to mark the book that was actually there. And then this is Miss Childress doing the same as Miss Sakura.
And now, after we showed them how it works, I want to show you all how it works. So the red box is the starting position, and then the yellow column is when they check in the class, and the blue column is when they check out. And the list basically just corresponds the ID number to the name. And in the real world, when we actually would use this at Hillcrest, we would need like the database of students to get all the ID badges and all the names that go with it. So how it works is first you scan the ID badge to put the ID in, and then you hit enter. And it'll tell you that Kanye West just clocked into class. And then you put a new ID badge, or scan another ID and hit enter. And it'll tell you Frida Kahlo just went into class. And if you put the same ID badge in and then hit enter, it'll tell you that Frida Kahlo just clocked out of class, and it'll tell you the times. So 4:49, 5:12, 5:15, whenever they went in and out of class. And if you put an ID badge that wasn't on the list of your students, whenever you hit enter, it'll tell you students not found. And that's about all.
Okay, I put in the Google Classroom for my kids. If you're one of my students, it's in Google Classroom. And let me see, I don't know if the remind is going to send because the link is included for the long. But it's in Google Classroom. You can go answer the Google form for this particular project. Can they answer it for me?
Is it okay to ask?
Y'all can.
That's fine.
Can you? I think.
Thanks all for your presentation. As a teacher, anything that holds students accountable is music to my ears. But I was wondering if did you consider maybe a procedure for what to do if students forget their ID badges? There's a way to manually override the bars and temporary badges are just are not the requirements on them.
So this may be harsh, but like maybe they can't come into class if they don't have their IDs, and that'll make sure that tomorrow they bring their ID.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh, I mean, you could type their ID number into the box instead of scanning.
So this setup would involve a teacher holding a the scanner at the door, connected to a laptop.
Yes.
Okay, all right, and so the teacher would be able to type the number in.
So the teacher would be the only one that could scan the ID, so you couldn't do it for yourself. So it would like, it wouldn't allow your friends to scan your ID as this.
Okay, all right. Unless they had, the students had put a sticker of, Cookie Monster over it, make sure it was,
Thank you for your presentation. One of my questions was, is it the teacher or are the students scanning, but you just answered that. So, I'm thinking that maybe since your design is really about a process and also, you know, your pseudocode, the code, it would have been really nice to have like a process flow. Because I was a little unsure from the beginning, like, is it the student? Is it the teacher?
You know, who's actually doing the scanning, and so forth. But, great job on the code and explaining the code. Just a few little things, that I noticed is, like on your stats, just make sure, this is for everybody, anytime you're doing, you know, a report, make sure that your stats are within the last few years. And I'm sure there's a lot of stats out there on the accident party. And then, I noticed on your matrix, which I appreciated, you going through very slowly, row by row on each slide. Just make sure you include the key, like if it's a -1, better than one, or, you know, whatever. But y'all did use color, and I did appreciate that because I was kind of able to figure it out from color. I think it's a great idea to use a scanner. How are we going to prevent the kids from scanning a badge if they're not really there? Is the teacher going to need to lay their eyes on the badge, on the face? Is all of that still going to be necessary?
I would say yes. Ideally, we would have the teacher standing at the door with a laptop and the scanner, but I know a lot of teachers don't want to stand at the door to take attendance. That's something that we would need to think about, on how the teacher would scan
Yeah, because at first I thought, well, maybe the kids they're getting their badges and they scan in. You know, like you would maybe do some jobs and stuff, and you scan in when you enter the room. They'll probably, of course, you know, get your friends to scan your tag, not actually there. But great job overall. Really appreciate it.
I first would echo that. Very good job, very well thought out. I think one thing that observation I would make is, since the last time I was in a high school was before y'all were born, to assume that someone who's a non-school person would understand all the processes, exactly what goes on and all. It would have helped to have physically gone step by step, literally as a student comes in, what happened. I think we kind of reflected on that, but that was my observation that I guess if an order can be misunderstood, it will. But otherwise, great thoughts and great process.
something to think about as a school is if this were to be implemented, it would be obviously be the cost of supplying every classroom with a barcode scanner. I just have a curiosity, how much are there different barcode scanners out there, and they all kind of do the same thing? Are there some that are wireless, you know, wirelessly or USB?
The Stones bought our barcode scanner. I'm not sure exactly how much it was. And the barcode scanner was supposed to be wireless. We had some difficulties making it wireless, but it still worked with the wire in. And I feel like the barcode scanners are normally around $30, and that I'm not sure if that's affordable.
I mean, you didn't try this at all in your class, just having a barcode scanner.
We didn't. No, we didn't.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah, the one we bought was Bluetooth, Or
Right.
you could never make the Bluetooth part of it work.
Okay.
So I'm gonna think about it when we're through with this,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, nobody wants to sit there with a laptop.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And ideally, we would want the ID badge scanner to record, like, when you go into class,
Right.
and then we go out to the
Right,
bathroom.
go to the bathroom,
and come
scan
back.
out, scan it.
We weren't able to implement this. But I think that would increase safety for like, if there's an emergency and the kids in the bathroom, we know exactly when they went to the bathroom and when they came back.
Yeah, one other real quick question, that is, I saw the way you solved the one problem by using the NLP. How do you think that would affect the overall, this process, like at the end of class when everybody's going to leave? It with, the teacher having to, with the teacher, the student, who was it every time that would have to enter that? And is there another way to possibly do that so that it would speed up the process when there's bulk group of people?
So hitting the enter button is like really time consuming, so ideally we would also want it to do it by itself, if that answers your question.
But also, if you think about it, like, if it automatically recorded the time whenever you scanned it, you could accidentally scan something or accidentally type a number in and it would automatically record the time. And I don't know if the teacher would want, I feel like it would be very prone to accidental scanning and then you'd have to like reset the sheet. So I'm not sure. It does take time, but it's more precise because of that.
All right, thank you.